Well, hello again, everybody. I'm back in nature, so let's talk about novels. But before we do, I just want to talk a little bit about myself and this channel. When I started this channel, I wasn't doing it with high ambitions. I wasn't trying to make this into my career. I wasn't trying to become a full-fledged YouTuber, nor was I trying to make this like my side hustle hobby kind of thing. Along my writing journey, I just I began to notice certain things that nobody was talking about on YouTube, and I felt like somebody should. I felt like people who wanted to write novel series should be considering these things, a list of things. And if nobody was going to make a channel talking about it, or at least talk about these things on their channel, then you know you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. I figured I would just do it. I laid out a list of things that I could make videos about that people should consider. And once I finish that list, I figured I'd be done with the channel basically. And today, well, I'm at that point. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the 10th thing that I think people should consider before writing a novel series, which is, should you have a single big bad villain? Or should you have multiple evolving villains? Now, like always, I'm not here to say that you should do one option or the other. I'm just laying out the options and saying that you should be thinking about the pros and cons of both. So, first, let's discuss the big bad villain, the single villain for your entire series. If you choose this option, then effectively every book in your series is the same. Book one, your hero versus your villain. In book two, that same hero versus that same villain. In book three, the hero versus the villain again. In book four, well, it's part four of the same battle between the same hero and the same villain. Same with book 5, 6, 7, however many books you got. If you have a single big bad villain, every book is about your one hero fighting that one villain. Even if your story is about a group of heroes, you might have a certain villainous group that you're always fighting. And so it's that one group of heroes versus that one group of villains in every book. This isn't bad, but it does create a slight problem. You have to figure out a way that you can tell this story. You can have these multiple clashes between the same two entities, but in different exciting ways. You have to figure out creative ways to tell the same story in different ways. The easiest way to do this is to have like undervillains, servants who serve your villain. So let's look at the Harry Potter series, for example. In Harry Potter, there is a single big bad villain. He who must not be named. Voldemort, right? Now, Voldemort is the big bad villain, but he is not directly the antagonistic force in all the books or all the movies. So in book one or movie one, you have a servant of the Dark Lord who is the main antagonist. The hero, the protagonist, is trying to confront this single villain, this bad teacher, but it's revealed that this bad teacher is actually secretly working for the big bad villain. In the second movie or second book, you have a situation where there is an evil, dark entity that is antagonizing the story or causing problems. And in a way, it's technically the big bad villain, but at the same time, it's not. It's like a magical tool or a shadow or like a little pawn that's controlled by the Dark Lord. This entity speaks of the Dark Lord like third person, as if the Dark Lord is somewhere else or is somebody else. In the third book or third movie, same thing. More servants of the Dark Lord, of the true villain of the story, the big bad villain. They are the main adversaries in that story. They're working for the big bad villain, but they're not the big bad villain. This means the first three books or movies, they're the same. It's the hero, Harry Potter, versus the villain, Voldemort. But they're presented in ways that are very different. In the fourth movie, or fourth book, we get another servant of the big bad villain. And that's the one who's doing the main antagonizing in that story. However, at the end of the story, that's when the big bad villain finally reveals himself. He finally returns. And then, moving forward for the rest of the books or movies, then the big bad villain is front and center. Obviously, all these servants are villains, but they're not like big bad villains in their own right. They're just pawns. You see the same thing in the Lord of the Rings series. So the big bad villain, Sauron, again another Dark Lord. He's not directly like in the films or in the books like causing problems. It's all his little servants, all his little minions that are causing the problems. Doing this, allowing for servants of the big bad villain to exist and to confront your hero, uh, allows for your hero to have victories without downgrading the threat level of the big bad villain. It creates a win-win scenario for the writer. Without these servants, these allies of the big bad villain, you're left with writing a story where the protagonist and antagonist directly clash in every book. And this opens a bit of a Pandora's box, different routes that are going to cause problems for your story. Imagine you have a 5-book novel series, and in books 1, 2, 3, and 4, your villain gets beaten by the hero. The hero beats the villain in book 1, book 2, book 3, and book 4. And then here comes book 5. Okay. And what do I get in book 5? Oh, well, the villain's going to clash with the hero. Okay. And what do I have to fear? Where's the tension? Where's the drama? If we have seen your villain get beaten multiple times, 4 times in a row, when you go into that 5th and final book of your series, there's no tension. It's gone. We know, historically speaking, the villain always loses. This means your villain is weak and not a threat. So where's the challenge? Why should anybody be scared of your villain? Why should your protagonist be working hard to defeat the villain if the hero's already defeated them multiple times? If you have an antagonist who is like really villainous, they're causing like real harm and danger to other people, maybe they're killing people of some sort. Okay, if that's happening, and let's say your protagonist defeats them in book 1. Maybe the hero is so good and kind-hearted that they forgive the villain. They say, "Hey, you killed all these people, you blew up this building, you kidnapped this kid and threatened to kill the kid for a ransom or whatever. That was all bad, but I believe that there's good in everybody. And I can see it in you. I think I think there's good in you, so I'm going to forgive you, but only if you promise to change your ways. And the villain says, I promise. You've set me straight. I'm not going to be a villain anymore. And the good guy's like, okay, let's shake hand. I'll shake on it and hold you to it. All right, have a great day. And then the book ends. Okay, well, maybe that could be a thing. Your hero is just a kind-hearted, you know, loving, forgiving kind of person. They give second chances. That's fine. That can work. There's people like that. And then the second book comes around, and it's revealed that the villain was lying, and they're actually still a villain, and they cause more problems. And the hero has to come back and defeat him a second time. Hey, that happens. But what's the rationale to do it a second time? Like, we've crossed this bridge before. At the end of the second book, why would the hero be like, hey, you betrayed me last time. This time, you better be serious when you tell me that you're good now. Are you good? And the villain's like, oh yeah, dude, I'm definitely good now. Trust me, bro. Just let me go. And the good guy's like, I believe it. I can see it in your eyes. You really are a changed man. Get out of here, buddy. Go live that life. That just makes your hero seem retarded. Especially if we're like 4 books in and like the hero has let him go 4 times. Eventually, readers are going to start wondering, is this hero ever going to stop this problem? Are they ever going to arrest this person or kill this person or, cast them out of the kingdom or disqualify them from the games, whatever your story's about? Like, solve this problem. Stop letting the villain exist just so that they can create more problems in later books. It looks like the woodpeckers have been having a lot of fun on this tree. I measured it one time. It's 100 feet tall, or at least it was. They've been breaking off pieces. Woodpeckers in the wind. Now, your story could go the other way. Maybe you have your hero and your villain clash, let's say the first 4 books, and all 4 books, the villain just keeps winning. Okay, the villain wins in book 1, wins in 2, wins in 3, wins in 4. And then in book 5, that's when you're finally going to have the hero actually win. Okay. Now, maybe you're going for like a determination story. The message of your story is never give up, never surrender. Even when things seem impossible, if you think something's wrong, oppose it no matter what, even if you don't stand a chance. Maybe you're going for like a George Washington kind of story. Like, you just keep losing, but as long as you don't quit, eventually you'll win. And maybe there's a decent story to be told that way. However, you really have to do some work to rationalize and justify why is it your protagonist is allowed to continue. Just like with the other way, where the hero was just steamrolling the villain book after book, and the readers are left wondering, why doesn't the hero just like kill the villain and be done with it? If every book your hero is losing, readers are going to wonder, why isn't the villain, who's supposed to be evil and villainous, why isn't the villain killing the hero? What is the rationale here? Why are they letting the hero keep living? Eventually, readers will start wondering if your protagonist has plot armor, if they're just being protected for the sake of the story, so the story can continue. If you're going to do the big bad villain, then you need to vary not just who the antagonistic force of each book is, but also who's winning in the different books. Even if you're telling a story about, someone who's supposed to be like really good, like Maybe it's just a story about sprinters, like it's a story about track runners, and you want your protagonist to be a, like a record holding sprinter or something. Okay, well, even if that's the case, it's good to give them some L's. Let them lose in some way. Even if it means you kind of attacking the subject from a different direction. So instead of them losing the track race because of a skill issue, because they're just not as fast as somebody else, maybe they just sprain their ankle. Maybe they get sick and they're battling a sickness for 2 days before the race, and it just holds them back. They get winded, they can't breathe, and they happen to lose. Maybe there's like some personal drama going on in their life with family or friends or a relationship, something that's distracting them. Sort of like this woodpecker who keeps knocking at trees when I'm trying to talk. It's very distracting. If you're going to do the big bad villain, have like the big bad villain maybe appear in book one so we can establish who the main villain is and why there's a tension between your main protagonist and your main antagonist. We establish that in book one, and then maybe the big bad villain goes away. And in book two, you have like underlings. You have the servants of your villain. They're pulling the weight. They're the ones leading all the trouble in book two, but it's then revealed maybe at the end of the book, oh, all these bad guys, they were working for the big bad guy. Oh my gosh, he's still out there. That sort of thing. Then maybe in book three, the big bad villain comes back around and scores a win somehow. The hero loses in some way. And since it's, a one-off kind of thing, like, oh, the hero lost, you can justify some type of sort of semi-coincidental thing, something that's kind of, you're fudging it a little bit so that they lose, but they're allowed to keep their life or something. Maybe in normal circumstances, losing means like losing your magical powers, but for some way, some reason, you make it so that your protagonist is able to keep his powers for, after losing. And it's a really rare thing. And if you do it just the one time, you can kind of get away with it. Then maybe in like book four, there's another servant of the Dark Lord, bad guy, whatever. And your protagonist has to come back after the embarrassing loss of the last book. And they kind of earn some more respect, some more credibility by defeating these servants, but the big bad villain's still out there. And then in book five, the hero and the villain finally clash again, and your hero gets the big win. The point is, you're telling the same story in each book. It's the same good guy force versus the same bad guy force. But you've got to figure out a way to tell that same story in different ways so that it keeps the audience entertained and coming back for more. In normal instances, you don't want the hero to just always win, and you don't want the villain to just always win. By giving your big bad villain workers or servants, that allows for your hero to get victories without your villain continuously getting L's. The bad guy side may be getting L's as a default of your hero winning these fights or whatever. But if you don't get the actual hero versus villain 1v1, then it's still up for debate. It's still questionable. Like, I wonder if the hero could actually defeat the villain. I don't know. Another thing to consider is if your villain is personally taking loss after loss after loss, like directly in face-to-face competition with the protagonist. If they keep losing, it makes them seem weak. So it's not only it not only de-escalates the tension in the story, but it also makes the readers wonder, why do any of these servants serve them? If you have your protagonist taking all the losses, you have to start wondering, like, what's the repercussions of all these losses? If we step out of the like life and death fighting, and maybe think more like in a more civilized society, maybe your story's about like racing, for example. Maybe you have a story about, race cars or something, and your protagonist is a race car driver. Okay, well, if your protagonist keeps losing races, you have to start wondering, why are they still employed? Like, they have sponsors all over their clothing. They're getting a paycheck. But why? If they keep losing, what are they providing to the company? Like, what are they achieving? Now, your singular big bad villain can have, undervillains, servants, and they're villains in their own right. But they're not big bad villains on their own. They're not on par with your big bad villain. This is different when you go to the other part of this topic. Remember, this video is about discussing, what should you do? Should you have a singular big bad villain, or should you have multiple evolving villains? So let's talk about that other option, the multiple evolving villains. Man, those are some mean looking thorns. Jeez, that looks terrible. These are like some crown of thorns looking stuff, man. Look how big they are compared to my hand. That wouldn't be fun to fall on. Now, with the multiple evolving big bad villains, you don't have the luxury or reward of having like this default takeaway from readers, which is like there's a distinct rival to your protagonist. So if I ask you, who's the villain in Lord of the Rings? Or who is the villain in Harry Potter? You'll know who I'm talking about. But if I ask you, who's the villain in Dragon Ball Z? Or who's the villain in Yu Yu Hakusho? You're going to get some different answers. In these stories, there's multiple villains. There's a list of multiple evolving villains, each one getting more and more dangerous, more powerful, more significant. If you decide to do your book series in this way, you could have your protagonist clash with a big bad villain in book one. And that villain is significant. That book is focused on that one villain. And your protagonist fights really hard or works really hard or thinks and studies really hard to somehow defeat this villain. And then at the end of the book, they're defeated and it's over. It was a great challenge, and your protagonist rose to that challenge. The story is over. Or is it? You think, the bad guy got defeated in book one, so what in the world's book two about? And that's when you realize, there's a new big bad villain. There's a new antagonistic force. And this one is even worse than the first. And then eventually, that villain is defeated. Maybe they're defeated in book two. Maybe it drags into book three, and in book three, the second big bad villain is defeated. And then later in your series, in book 4 or whatever, eventually there's a third big bad villain that comes out. Or maybe in book 4, maybe you have a 5-book series. There's big bad villain in book 1, and they're defeated. In books 2 and 3, there's a new villain that's the big bad villain, and then they're defeated. In book 4, there's seemingly a random group of problem makers or something, and your protagonist has to defeat them. And then when they are defeated, it's revealed, wait a minute, this group was secretly working for this other big bad villain over there, a third one, and they're even worse than all the others. This creates a bit of a timeline in your story, a progression in your story where your character is developing. They're getting smarter, they're getting stronger, they're getting faster. Maybe your protagonist is like moving up in rank through like military or something, and every time they move up, they're gaining more responsibilities. The villains are constantly evolving. They're getting bigger and badder. They're commanding bigger armies. They have greater and greater forms of magic that you have to counteract. All of this creates a very forward progression for the story. And it really helps readers feel engaged. It makes readers wonder, like, where's this story going? The trick with this option is you have to make sure that readers understand that the stakes or the threat continuously is getting more and more. It's increasing with each new villain. One way that you can show this, the easiest way, it's a classic trope, and it's not something that's burnt out. Like, people still really like it. It works great. Is if you have your protagonist, like let's say in book one, your protagonist works really hard to defeat the first big bad villain. They work hard, but they do get the victory. Then in book two, that big bad villain that your hero worked really hard to defeat somehow encounters some other person that we've never seen before. And then that other random person just mops the floor with the previous big bad villain. And they're setting the stage right off the bat that this new person that just showed up on the stage, they're way bigger of a threat. They're way faster, they're way stronger, they're way smarter, whatever the case might be. And that means they're a way bigger threat for your hero. Or you could have the protagonist working really hard to defeat the first big bad villain, and then they don't. Maybe they lose. They lose and right before like they're about to die, right before the big bad villain defeats them, somehow some other person comes out of nowhere and they defeat the big bad villain for you. And it's like, wow, man, what a breath of fresh air. I can release a sigh of relief. The threat has been neutralized. We're safe now. And then the evil laughter emerges. And you're like, wait a minute. This person that just saved me, the person that just saved the kingdom and defeated this big bad villain, are they evil too? Yes, they're evil too. And they just proved that the villain that your protagonist couldn't defeat, they defeated easily. And that means your hero's going to have to really step their game up if they're going to save the kingdom now. Now, if you do it in a way that the the different big bad villains don't cross paths, then you can have some cool like fan theories about, oh, what if this one clashed with that one? Who would win? And people would say, oh, well, obviously, the third villain was way stronger than the second and first. And then you might think, oh, well, no, because remember the second villain was really fast. Maybe that speed could overpower the magic of the third or something like that. Those kinds of fan theories can really help keep the spirit of your story alive among your readers and the fan base. You can also do a really cool thing where maybe the first villain was significant, the significant big bad villain, but it was just the first one. And then later on in your series, the third villain or the fourth villain is revealed to be talking to the first villain, and the first villain is like bowing down to this strange new person who rises from a throne or something. And it's revealed, oh no, this new person is the master or the teacher, the king or whatever of that first big bad villain. That means this one's way more powerful. You see this tree? This big tree here? It's a pretty cool tree. It's like really dead. And see if I can zoom in. It's hollow. See? You can see right through it. It's hollow all the way down here. Like the whole tree is completely hollow. See? I don't know if you can see it. Let's try. See? Can you? I don't know if you can see light in there or not. I have to check later, but yeah, it's like hollow all the way up. Pretty cool. Also pretty dangerous. It could just randomly decide to just fold and come crashing down. There are some issues with the multiple evolving, villains. The benefit is, things keep changing, the stakes keep increasing, this forward momentum exists. That's all good. However, greatest strengths also tend to be greatest weaknesses. This forward momentum creates a trap, a couple of traps. So, one is power creep. So, what power creep is, it's where the power levels or the strengths of your heroes and villains, they keep increasing as the story goes on, as the series goes on. Which can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. So you want your protagonists to have to get better to defeat the first villain. But then the second villain shows up and they're even more powerful. So your protagonist has to get faster or stronger or smarter. And then they defeat the second villain. And then they have to level up again to defeat the third villain and then the fourth villain. And every time they do, they're just getting more and more, stronger or whatever. And it can get to a point where it becomes outlandish. It can get to a point where it doesn't make sense. Like, how are they that strong? But it can also start getting to a point where it starts breaking the story. So let me give you an example. Maybe in book one, your protagonist can, control the mind of a person. Okay, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty useful power to have. Then after they beat the first villain and they get into book two, maybe they learn the ability to control the minds of 10 people at once. Whoa, now that's a step up. Being able to control 10 people at once, you could mind control like a whole gang of people. You could do a lot of damage with that. Okay. Then maybe you get to, the third book and your protagonist can control the minds of 100 people at once. Whoa. That's getting pretty extensive. That's like a small army. And then in the fourth book, when you reach 1,000 minds, yeah, it's like a whole legion basically. Like this is getting kind of insane. In fact, with your protagonist being so good, being able to control the minds of 1,000 people, how does your villain have any chance of, having an army overpower your protagonist? The tension starts fading. Maybe by the fifth book, your protagonist can control the minds of every person on planet Earth. Okay. The end? How do we have a story at that point? Why can your character control the minds of every person on planet Earth, but there's a villain who, for some reason, is outside that ability? What's going on here? And if your protagonist can control the minds of every person on planet Earth, I mean, are we sure this is a protagonist anymore? or at least a hero? Like, it's getting kind of villainous. Is this gonna be one of those stories where the person turns into a villain by the end? They enslave all of humanity? Like, what's going on here? And maybe it's the other way. Maybe, maybe instead of the hero being overpowered, maybe it's the villain that's overpowered. If your villain can control the minds of everyone on the planet, like, that's scary, that's dangerous, but how does your protagonist hope to defeat him? How does your protagonist evade that mind control? Or what if you have like a character who um they're able to get shot and they're okay. And then they become strong enough that they can get hit by a train and they're okay. And then they like fall off a cliff. They fall like 3,000 feet, land on their head, and then they get up and they're totally okay. Okay, at that point, like, how do you defeat this person if they're so overpowered? And then what happens is you, as the writer, you write yourself into a corner because your character is so powerful, you don't know what to do with them. And so you might end up downgrading them, and it doesn't make sense. It breaks the story. So if your character can fall 3,000 feet, hit their head, and they're okay, they just get up and walk away, how then does it make sense that someone, hits them in the back of the head with a rock, knocks them out, and then they get kidnapped? What? This is an issue that superpowered entities have, like Dragon Ball Z or like the Incredible Hulk. Like, these characters get so strong they can just like punch the earth and it vaporizes. They can just destroy the planet. It's like, okay, but if they're that strong, how do you have a story? How do they fight? You know, like, if I had the power in my fist to punch the earth and make it just vanish, my punch is that powerful. What happens when I encounter a villain who can do the same thing and we punch each other in the face? Like, how do we not kill each other? And if we can both withstand that punch, how does our punch it, or how do our punches not just destroy the earth beneath us and then we're just left floating out in space? The other issue with this multiple evolving villains and the forward progression of the story is I don't know what the good term for it would be. I'll just make one up off the top of my head. Let's just call it like tension inflation. Yeah, it's like the tension gets so ridiculous it becomes absurd. It becomes hard to grapple with, like, what's the weight of this story anymore. So maybe in the first book, your protagonist has to like defend his family. Okay, cool. He defends the family. And then in book 2, he has to defend the village. Okay, seems understandable. It's still reasonable. And then in book 3, he gets, somehow he gets into like the Imperial Army as a soldier. There's like an invading army, and he's like sent to a foreign land, and he has to fight in a war on strange soil. Okay, it's still in the realm of understandable. I get it. Tense. The tension continues to grow. We went from defending the family to defending the village to now we're defending the country. Okay, it's all working out. Then maybe in book 4, the protagonist has somehow become like a de facto king tyrant of the kingdom or something, and he has to lead the charge himself, like he's defending the kingdom or the empire from some foreign kingdom or empire, and it's like highly political, and there's like issues with like tariffs and trades and clash of civilization, and it's like, what happened to the story about the humble farmer guy who just loved his family and wanted to protect his wife and kids? Like, now it's like this weird political story. What's going on? What is this? Then maybe at the end of the story, it's revealed, oh no, the other kingdoms that were trying to take over your kingdom, they're actually being mind controlled by aliens. And then in book 5, there's like a alien invasion. And there's these strange entities that are trying to take over the whole planet. And, underneath your kingdom is like a strange stone that could be used to defeat the aliens. And it's up to you and your kingdom to stop the evil aliens from taking over your land, because if they do, they'll take over the whole world. And once they take over the whole world, there'll be nothing stopping them from taking over the universe. Ha ha ha. Like, what? What's going on? Your story has gone so off the rails, it doesn't even seem like it's the same story anymore. I know these examples seem quite ridiculous, but what I'm talking about is ridiculous. It is a ridiculous element or theme that does appear in stories. It happens in like Marvel superhero movies. It happens in different anime stories. It goes from, oh, we need to just, beat this villain who is skilled at martial arts, to we've got to stop this evil alien entity that jumped from another universe and is trying to destroy the multiverse. What? Is this even the same story? So, with the multiple evolving villains, big bad villains, you've got to change the story up, create new tension, have this forward momentum, but you got to keep the reins in your hands. You can't let go. You've got to keep control of your story and make sure it doesn't go off the rails, or that the powers or abilities of your characters don't become too big to manage. As a personal example, in my novel series, once upon a time, I was tossing around the idea of my heroes clashing with an entity or villain who could effectively just change matter all around him. Like, he could, like, turn a tree into a person, or a person into a tree. He could change a river of water into a river of lava. He could just manipulate the whole universe around him. Anything could, its physical appearance and texture, everything could just change. He could redesign the universe around him. And that seemed kind of cool. It seemed like the logical next step of progression in my story. But I instantly was like, what the hell can I do with that? How can my heroes possibly confront that? Like, he's too overpowered. I can't do that. So, with these two options, the single big bad villain and the multiple evolving villains, you've got some pros, you've got some cons. Both options are good. Both options can be amazing paths to choose. You just got to choose the one that's right for you and make sure you pursue it in the correct way. There is, however, a third way you can structure your story. You can try to blend these two. You can try to find a mid ground. So maybe you have a story where there's a single big bad villain in book 1, and that villain is defeated, but they live. And then in book 2, there's a new villain. Maybe there's 3 new villains that appear in book 2. They're like a trio bad group. Okay? And they're doing their own thing. They're part of some gang or something. And it's revealed that these 3 are working for some other new big bad entity. Okay? So you defeat those 3, and that's the end of book 2. In book 3, you then meet this new big bad boss. And this new big bad boss puts up a big fight, and your protagonist has to, level up to defeat them. Then in book 4, the big bad villain of book 1, the one you've already defeated, or the hero's already defeated, this villain comes back. So you have this villain reoccurring. They've come back and they've been training really hard, and now they're better, they're stronger, or whatever. And so book 4 is about fighting the same villain that you've fought before. First time you defeated him, this time maybe you defeat him again. Then in book 5, your protagonist has to battle some third big bad villain. And maybe they're really strong, and this big bad villain ends up defeating your hero, your protagonist. But the protagonist keeps their life somehow. They escape or whatever. And they have to live with an L. They're gonna have to, study hard, train hard, meditate, whatever, because they've got some work to do. Because that third big bad villain is still out there. Then in book 6, the third big bad villain encounters the first big bad villain. Okay? Remember, this was the one you fought twice. Villain number 3 clashes with villain number 1. Maybe your first big bad villain finds your protagonist and is like, hey, I met that guy, villain number 3. He's bad. I can't defeat him. And I know you can't either. Our only option is if we put our differences aside. We're going to have to work together if we're going to defeat him and save the kingdom or whatever, save the world. And so your protagonist is like, okay, we'll do it. And now your readers are excited. You're like, oh shit, man, this is like the dream team. Like this villain who then leveled up and got even stronger. We've seen this person come back around. Now they're like the anti-hero. They're like villainous, but they've joined the side of good. This is so cool. And it's like people will be so excited seeing your protagonist team up with this reoccurring villain. And you're like, oh man, this is so cool. And they end up working together and defeating the third big villain. And it's like, yes, this is so wonderful. And right there you can end the story and it's cool. You had 3, big bad villains, but there was one that kind of was a reoccurring villain. So it's sort of like a singular big bad villain was villain number 1, but you've also got the mix of different villains. Or you cannot end the story there, because maybe after the 2 work together to defeat villain number 3, and the hero's like, yes, we did it. Sword goes through him or something. And he's like, oh, what the? And turns around. And wouldn't you know it, villain number 1 is still a villain. He betrayed the hero. And he's like, ha 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 ha. We defeated, or I used you to defeat villain number 3. And now I've defeated you, and I'm going to take over the world myself. Ha 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 ha. And so the first villain turns out to be the big bad villain. And he just keeps coming back. Maybe by villain number 1 teaming up with the hero, they're able to kill villain number 3. And by killing villain number 3, maybe villain number 1 like absorbs his magical force and it makes him even stronger. He's super duper villain now. Something like that. Like you can do stuff like that to where it's a mix of the big bad villain, but also the evolving multiple villains. Whatever you decide to do, the main goal is just make sure your story is entertaining, but not too predictable. Give your readers something fun, something exciting, and something to root for. You want to make sure that your story is logical, that your power progression makes sense, and you want to make sure that if you have villains, they're worthy of fear. There's a reason that they are a threat. There's a reason that people fear them, and there's a reason that people serve them. As for your hero, you want to make sure that your readers understand There's a reason that your hero is the hero. We can trust that they're going to save the day. But we also understand that there's something human about them. There's something real. They're not perfect. They make mistakes. They sometimes lose. You can't just fully trust them to always get the job done because they might lose. Well, I reckon that's all I got for this video. And that's all I got for this series of things to consider before writing a novel series. I don't plan on, like, I'm not going to be releasing any more of these like continuation videos. This series is now done, so don't expect like routine uploads anymore. But at some point I might release a video here or there talking about writing, or maybe talking about my own novel series or something. I know I do want to make a movie trailer for my series, so I'll eventually release that. And maybe some like updates on my books at some point. But yeah. I guess that's it. Until we meet again. Later.